me make sure. You. Okay, we are now recording. So again, you can just do your hand if you want to talk. Daryl will pick you so you can talk. And I will watch as anybody else starts coming in or wants in, and I'll let them in the meeting. I'm going to share my screen so that I can put the agenda up and things. And then I'll let Daryl go ahead and get started. Okay, can you see my screen? Oh, wait a minute, somebody's waiting in the waiting room. Hold on one second. Let me stop sharing again here so I can see who this is. Hi. She's connecting to. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Okay, let's see. If you can just go ahead and mute yourself. And I was just telling everybody that if you click on the participants on the bottom of your screen, it will open up on the right-hand side. If you want to talk, you can just hit the hand, and Daryl can call on you to raise your hand at that point. Okay? Okay, I'm going to try sharing my screen again. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Daryl, do you want to go ahead and get started?
How do I open it up so I can see everyone with their hands first? If their hand goes.
Let's see, I'm not sure.
Down to 3 people, or I'm sorry, 6
Well,
people.
we can, so when I put my screen, that creates the problem, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm seeing that Paul has raised his hand. Let's see. Okay, so if you click on the box, did anything come up that showed that there was participants raising their hands?
No, that's why I was asking. I wanted to make sure that
Can you see
it's
my
easier for
screen?
me to have everyone on my screen. Okay, I figured out how to do it. Okay, I see Mr. Tom, Sean. Okay.
Okay, can you click in there and do things with it now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, great.
Okay, very good.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Does anybody have any questions on the minutes? No, no questions. I'm going to, how do we unmute everybody for a vote? Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes as written.
Do you have a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion?
If you can say your names when you're speaking so that Barb can get down in the minutes who is approving and seconding it, it would be great.
John Shannon seconded.
Sean Williams moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Second motion passes. To approve the minutes.
I think Mary has a question. She's asking to talk. No? You okay, Mary?
I'm muting her. Yes, Mary.
Okay, Mary?
I have no questions. I was just raising my hand to approve the minutes.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Barb, did anybody in the public write in with anything to say? No? Okay.
We had no public comment.
So we did advertise that and nobody emailed in to Barb, like requested. Looks like Chris, you're up.
Great. Hello, everybody. How are you? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? I can only see like 6 of you, but hopefully you're doing okay. I start most of my conversations with people that I haven't seen in a long time, asking them if they're okay, if they're safe, if their families are okay. I do care about you guys. It's really, really, really wonderful to see you. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be getting back into the swing of things with you guys. I do apologize for the canceled meetings. As you can imagine, bandwidth has been very limited at the district. It's been COVID-19, a lot of COVID crisis response. So I'm happy to be back in the swing of things, and I hope that if not today, at some point, you guys will take some time to have a conversation about the important role that this specific committee can play in the weeks and months and whoever knows how long the COVID crisis lasts. I believe this committee has an important role to play in the decisions we make going forward. And I do want to beg your patience as we head into tonight's or this afternoon's discussion, because there are a lot of unknowns. I know that you guys are hearing that everywhere. I know that you live that in your everyday lives. There are so many unknowns, but when it comes to district, school, state finance in particular, it is literally an unknown. We do not get sales tax revenue data until May 25th from the EDR. So discussions we're going to have today are going to be very broad, and you're not going to get a lot of numbers from us because we simply do not have them. The state does not have them either. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to me. I suspect that it will be frustrating to you. I know it's frustrating to staff. But I beg your patience in knowing that staff is going through every potential scenario. They're truly trying to prepare for every potential that could be coming our way. And the other thing that I would ask is please have faith in your district leadership. As you saw, we transferred from an in-class, face-to-face learning environment for nearly 95,000 students to a distance learning environment for nearly 95,000 students in 2 weeks. And has it been perfect? It has not been perfect, but Lee County has led the state in the manner in which we have achieved this transition. And staff, again, continues to work on different scenarios. What are the lessons that we have learned from this transition time, and how can we make it better in the event distance learning becomes necessary in the fall or becomes necessary as a result of a hurricane? And so I ask you to have some faith in your leadership, understanding that, I really do believe that a crisis either makes or breaks a leader. And I think that you've seen at every level of leadership in this district, from Dr. Adkins down all the way into the schools, that this crisis really has made our leadership. I've been very impressed from a parent perspective and from a school board perspective as to how this has been playing out. And I'll tell you, the two guiding principles that we've had as a district have been grace and compassion. Grace and compassion. We want to approach our students with a sense of grace and compassion. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. So we give students assignments on Monday, and perhaps they have to be turned in by Friday, or perhaps they have to be turned in on Sunday. It depends on the teacher. It depends on the class. But what we're telling teachers is, listen, we're trying to gauge mastery of material. We're not trying to gauge mastery of meeting deadlines. So if a student hands in assignments a few days late, a week late, we're accepting that as long as they can show mastery of the materials that were a part of that assignment, if that makes sense. I mean, think about a scenario where you have 2 full-time working parents, 4 kids in a house, and 2 Chromebooks. Where is the time in the day to get all of those assignments done in a 5 or a 7-day period of time? The time might not exist in that household. So we're trying to stay focused on the goal of making sure that students are getting at least some instruction during this time, but we're also trying to understand the individual situations in individual homes. 2 more things I'd like to talk to you about, and one is I was at a virtual meeting the other night with Representative Ray Rodriguez, and he talked about the budget, and I'll tell you what he said. He said that he believes, as you know, do state leaders believe, that there's enough money in our reserves to get us through this budget year. Now, in terms of the budget that was approved by the legislature in February, but has not yet been presented to the governor for next school year, some things are happening that might make it possible for the governor to approve the budget that's been given to him. CARES Act dollars. Y'all know what CARES Act dollars are, right? The federal stimulus or relief dollars that have come out of Congress. State of Florida, as has every state, have received significant CARES Act dollars, but there's a caveat. Those CARES Act dollars are not permitted to be used to backfill lost revenue. So the state of Florida and other states have been lobbying the Fed to please take that restriction away. And there's movement at the federal level. We're seeing movement that there's a recognition that lost revenue is really one of the biggest problems for states headed into the next budget year. So there's movement there. If the Fed does take that restriction away, then we're not looking at major changes in this budget right now. I will tell you that I also heard in a different meeting I was in a meeting with state education chiefs from Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, along with the federal equivalent of that office. And I can't remember the exact title of the man that was in that meeting, but that the federal individual indicated that there's a lot of talk at the federal level of making sure that education budgets are not severely negatively impacted by what's going on in the economy right now. Because I think there's been widespread recognition through this entire crisis that our economy and our society does not function without schools. So the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous is what Representative Rodriguez said about a potential meeting in the fall to look at budgets if we determine that the revenue is not going to be sufficient, even with the Federal CARES Act dollars, if the revenue is not going to be sufficient to fill the budget needs if this budget is approved, if I'm making sense. The only reason why that makes me nervous is because the fall is after elections, and it's a lot easier to make cuts to education after elections than it is right now, when everybody is obviously very much understanding the importance of education and the importance of properly funding education. So that would be the only caveat. But I will tell you that as I've gone through this COVID thing, the number one thing that makes me concerned is people who have gotten sick or have a loved one who's gotten sick. The number two thing that has made me concerned has been the budget. So after hearing from Representative Rodriguez, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and it's not, from what he said, it's not as dire as I thought it might be. The last thing I want to say is I am meeting, as you guys are, in my home. I do have 4 kids. So if I hear glass breaking or I hear some other indication of something bad going on in my house, I will have to get off video. I'm not being rude. I literally have to respond to that. And finally, this will be my last meeting with you guys. We had a workshop last week where board liaisons were assigned for different committees. I have been with you for 2.5 years, and I have thoroughly enjoyed all of my time with you, but it is time for me to move on. Ms. Debbie Jordan will be taking my place as your board liaison, and I will be moving on to District Advisory Committee. Those are my comments. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Anybody have any questions?
Sean has a question. I'll unmute him. Whoops.
You can see his hand up.
Sean?
Ms. Patrica, thank you very much for an update. Just a quick inquiry about potential reopening for August of next year. Are we still looking at in-person classes, or what is the board's approach to reopening schools next school year?
Every possible scenario is under consideration right now. Again, that's another situation where there are so many unknowns that it's really, really difficult for us at this point to make a decision. But I can tell you this: we will be sending out at least one, if not more, surveys, if not more than one survey, to parents and teachers to make sure that we're capturing what the community wants and we're taking what they want into consideration. And the other big piece of this is the Department of Education. As you all know, the Department of Education has significant control over what we do. And the DOE said close schools. We didn't really have any say in that. The DOE told us to close. So if the DOE tells us we can't open in August, we can't open in August. I don't anticipate that being the case. I know I want to reopen schools. I have 4 teenagers who I desperately want to go back to school. So just from a personal perspective, I want them back in school, but from an educational perspective, you know, there's a lot that's lost without that face-to-face interaction. From a social perspective, there's a lot that's lost. You know, even though I'm seeing all your faces and it's making me really happy, it's different from being in a room together and being able to read your body language, and our kids are missing out on all of that. And there is a real genuine mental health aspect to the kind of seclusion and separation that we have all been experiencing. And we're seeing that play out not just with adults, but with our students as well. So, Sean, you ask a question that I don't have an answer to. I can tell you that the district is working to put together a pre-K through 12 education pandemic task force that will not be political. It is a task force, the membership of which will be chosen by the superintendent. And we will have health experts there. We will have safety and security experts there. The list of experts will be lengthy. But that is a recommendation that came out of the Florida School Boards Association. And many districts are creating something exactly like that, because you know what happens in Lee is not necessarily what's going to happen in Miami-Dade and Duval and Suwannee, right? We will be given, the other thing Ray Rodriguez assured us of is that we will be given a significant level of local control in determining when and how to reopen. So I'm sorry, Sean, that I can't answer that question, but I can assure you that every scenario is being looked at by staff as we speak.
Next up is Paul. I'm having trouble unmuting him, so.
First off, Chris, I want to thank you for the 2.5 years that you've given to the committee. And secondly, I understand all the moving parts that we're dealing with. I would hope that the school board will be able to work closely with administration, because we both know food service is a source of revenue if we're not going to be providing the food. Transportation has always been a nightmare in trying to get everything taken care of. Obviously, if we're not going to have kids on school buses, we have to come up with game plans. I understand contracts are not being renewed with some of our outside vendors. So I'm just hoping that the school board can work closely with administration on this one and give them adequate time to do adjustments as appropriate with budgets, negotiating, et cetera.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, and everything you said is absolutely correct. When I think about transportation, how do you socially distance on a bus? You know, is that even still going to be necessary in August? We don't know. Right now, we don't know, but we're planning for both. So, and then in terms of the school board providing direction to staff and giving them the space, I think that this budget discussion today is going to show you exactly that. Because we were, as a board, we were asking questions. What's going on with the budget? What's going on with finance? What are we doing? And you mentioned the cancellation of some vendor contracts. I know that staff has been absolutely dedicated to cutting where they can because of the uncertainties of the future. So is this necessary? If this expenditure is necessary, we're making the expenditure. If the expenditure is not necessary, we're not making the expenditure right now. So I think that as Kelly starts to talk, some of what you just talked about, Paul, will be addressed.
Daryl, you on mute.
Sorry, I was saying, John, you're up.
Thank you very much. Chris, like Paul just said, and I know I speak for many of the others, we will miss you. You've provided a lot of guidance to this group, and very importantly for us that are new members, a lot of history. And so we really value your experience in that regard. I'd like to play a little bit off quite a comment that Sean made. As you had your conversation with Representative Rodriguez, I think you pronounced his name, the underlying assumption of that was that school would be back in session, physically in session, or that was kind of an open-ended discussion. What was his underlying assumption?
There was no underlying assumption with regard to how instruction will be delivered in fall. It was strictly a budget-driven discussion. And it wasn't a conversation. It was a meeting like this one And I asked the question with specific regard to education. So it was strictly a budget conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Mary?
Are you me? Are you,
Yes.
is it me? Okay. Chris, for one thing, I'm kind of new to the finance advisory, but I really have appreciated your comprehensive knowledge of finance. So I've been lucky to have been schooled under you, really. And also, just a real quick question. And I've been hearing anecdotal stuff from teachers that say they actually have students that never check in. And I was just wondering if the school district basically will have the finances to remediate the students that will be behind.
And that's part of what we're talking about in ongoing budget discussions, or part of what staff, I should say, is talking about in ongoing budget discussions. We understand the typical summer slide that we experience when we're off for the summer is going to be significantly exaggerated as a result of this time. So I meet with the superintendent every other week. And I want to say, since this thing started, every other week I have said to the superintendent, my kids are done on Wednesday. Can we please provide them with more assignments? Now I'm filling in, I'm making them do virtual tours, I'm making them do more PE than they would ever want to do. I'm filling in those blanks. Not every family has the ability or the opportunity to do that, but I'll tell you what, the other 50% of feedback he's getting is, my kids are overwhelmed. They can't possibly complete all of these assignments in a 1-week period. So I have confidence that what staff in academic services is doing right now is finding ways to deploy instruction so that it's more individualized to each student's needs. And if that means, we go back to school with 10 kids in a classroom next year, do we have to ability group those 10 kids so that we can get those 10 kids who are high flyers and having absolutely no difficulty and no slide, provide them with some not extra rigor, and then ability group other kids who perhaps struggle a little bit more during this period of time to make sure that we overcome the slide that they experience during distance learning and then during the summer. Those are certainly academic issues that are being addressed. And from a budgetary perspective, we need to look at how we can afford to roll that out. And I can tell you that the Superintendents Association and the Florida School Boards Association have raised those issues with the Department of Education and said, listen, this isn't a regular school year. I mean, think about being a 4th grade teacher next year. Your kids have got to have mastered reading by the end of 3rd grade. And these 4th grade teachers are going to be having kids come into their classrooms, whether they be virtual classrooms or face-to-face classrooms, who are all over the place. And we have no end of school year testing to give to those teachers to say, this is where your kids are. So we're going to have to assess them to begin the school year. It's going to be a huge lift, Mary. But it is one I am very, very confident that our teachers are capable of making.
Thank you.
Sean, you're up next. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Patrica, also, I understand that the district is in negotiations with a vendor regarding a school proximity plan to reduce our number of zones and number of choices, which would obviously save the district quite a bit of money if that were to be implemented, especially during this crisis type situation. How close is the district to implementation on any plans, not to backslide and go into resegregation or anything like that, but would that be in place for next school year, or what's the time horizon on that? Thank you.
No, I would not expect that to be in place for next school year. And we have hired the vendor. We have signed the contract, and the vendor is currently working. As a matter of fact, at yesterday's briefing, we got an update as to where they are in the process. They're still very much in the information gathering process. And they were given, I want to say, 2 real guiding principles. And one of them was to create proximity while maintaining diversity in our schools. So the diversity piece is huge. They know it, they understand it, they heard it from every board member when they first came in front of the board. So the time frame for that, Sean, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I don't know when we expect that to be completed and implemented, but I will definitely find out and get back to you. And before I finish, you guys who all said nice things to me, thank you. I'm an elected official. I don't hear nice things very often. So thank you for that.
Paul, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. Chris, last question. When you spoke with Mr. Rodriguez, did he give any indication how the state is going to be handling classroom sizes? Because obviously we've always had that issue in our district where we've had overcrowding in some of the classrooms and we've had that battle. Now if they come back and say, and you refresh my memory, that we could potentially have 10 students in the classroom for proper social distancing, how are we going to handle bringing the students back? We're going to have students who are going to be left behind because I understand 2% of the student population probably is not going to be moving forward to the next grade level and or not even graduating because of non-compliance with their school mandates. So I'm just trying to understand how we're going to address this from a building structure standpoint.
And I don't want you guys to leave here today thinking that we are going to have 10 students in a classroom in August. If our schools were to open tomorrow, according to CDC guidelines, we would have to have 9 students and 1 teacher in the classroom, because right now we are only permitted to have, according to CDC guidelines, we're only allowed, permitted to have 10 people gathered in one place, right? So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in August, but those are the guidelines as they are in place today. I don't, again, we don't have enough information from the state, Paul, for me to answer that question. I simply don't know if they are going to waive class size requirements or if they're going to implement new class size requirements that are in line with CDC guidelines. They are also working very, very hard to come up with different scenarios to provide us with guidance. You know, I spoke with the superintendent today, and you know, we haven't always loved, you know, what's come out of the DOE. But through this process, we have been very, very happy and very impressed with the guidance that the DOE has provided, because it allows us to make decisions that we know are in the best interest of our students here in Lee County. So as much as we're working on different scenarios, the DOE is doing the same thing as we speak, as is the Florida High School Athletic Association, as is every other organization that provides guidance to us so that we can roll out plans. And one other thing, Mary, you mentioned something about funding, and Kelly, I think you can address this better than I can. We're getting funding based on the last FEFP count, is that true?
Yes, as of right now, the state has told us that they're not going to reduce the current year's funding, and that their expectation is that we will keep our employees employed and stuff through the end of their contract, because they're not cutting our payments, so we're not supposed to be cutting our employees. So we're working under that, under the impression that we're going to get fully funded in the current year based on our student population, and we're moving forward with that scenario for this year. Saying that, we're doing everything we can to look everywhere that we have to make sure that we are only doing essential purchases right now, so that we have that extra funding in place in case it's needed to help us through next year.
Tamika, I think you're trying to get my attention.
I'm sorry, did you ask me a question? I didn't hear you.
Tamika, I think she was trying to raise her hand to talk.
Yeah, it was a clapping sign. I just wanted to also just thank Chris for her service. You'll be dearly missed. You're amazing, full of knowledge, and done so much for us. And I know there were talks about vendors who would assist with tutoring or education. Exactly what were you referring to when you talked about vendors?
I think when we were talking about vendors, we were talking about exactly what Kelly just mentioned, which is cutting wherever we can. And I would be stunned if we had a vendor contract that didn't include a clause that, you know, we have the right to exit the contract at any time for whatever reason. So I think that's what we're talking about more than tutoring. I think we're talking about just in general, looking at tightening our belts as tight as humanly possible. Right now, one other thing I want to mention to you is this, and I know staff has thought about this. Think about a typical disaster in Florida. That's a hurricane, right? We're growing at a rate of 1,500 new students per year. Those students move here. Their parents experience their first hurricane and they're like, heck no, I'm out of here. I don't want to live in Florida anymore. And so we see an exodus of students. We're likely to see the opposite here because we've got a lot of unemployment and we've got parents who perhaps can't afford the private school tuition anymore. So those students are going to be coming into our district. Or we have a scenario where we have some distance learning, we have some kind of blended learning, or schools have to close because there's an outbreak in a school and that school is a private school and now those kids are distance learning. Parents don't see the value in paying thousands and thousands of dollars for distance learning, so we could see an influx as a result of that as well. So I want you to think about that and also know that, you know, we are the major provider of shelters in the event of a hurricane. Staff is also working with the Lee County EOC to determine what our shelters going to look like in a time of social distancing. So they're really, you know, as I talk to the superintendent and I ask him questions, well, what about hurricanes? What about this? What about that? Staff has already talked about these things. So I really feel like we're in good shape in terms of identifying every potential scenario that could come our way. Now, of course, you know, we're not clairvoyant. We can't imagine it all. We can't see it all. Nobody could have seen this coming. But I'm confident in our leadership as we stand here today.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sean?
All right. I also want to reiterate, thank you very much for your service to this committee and the board as a whole. A couple of things, if you would reiterate to the board, though, in your considerations of opening up for the next school year, possibly staggered schedules, encourage outdoor classes when available, additional school nurses. I'm sure that that is going to be something that is going to be on the minds of every parent out there. And then also think about possibly a mixed virtual in-person type schooling, you know, look at the critical areas. So third grade is obviously a critical area. Kindergarten is a critical area. Freshman is a critical area. Seniors are a critical area. And if we're going to do 50% capacity, let's think about maybe a blended hybrid virtual in-person and shifting, and maybe even having 2 bus routes a day to facilitate that staggered schedule. And that way we can ensure social distancing or physical distancing, at least, with some social interaction for all of our students to get through this. And then rotating in sophomores and juniors into the schools to maintain, you know, that 50% threshold presence inside the schools. And we might see some savings on that by doing it that way, where we don't have to have so many in-school facilities at one time, but just a food for thought, maybe to carry on to the other working group that's working on this. Those are just my ideas off the top of my head.
Thank you. I took copious notes, Sean. I will most definitely report that to the board. Thank you.
I'd like to go next. First, I did want to thank you for all that you've done for the system, and especially for this committee over the years. You've been invaluable. My thoughts on moving forward are, we're going to have major problems. In my opinion, the classroom size at 6 feet apart, that cannot work. Sean brought up multiple bus rides that would possibly double transportation costs, if not more. What about in the hallways, the cafeteria? the bathroom, who's going to, stand outside the bathroom to make sure that, only certain kids are in there. There's multiple challenges that are going to be coming up. Have we reached out to staff to see what they think of it? Because while you see a lot of people online in the forums, such as on Facebook, discussing, I want my kids to go back to school, I want this, I want that, why can't they play sports, why can't they do this or that? People are completely forgetting about the staff members. It's safe for my kids, but what about, the 65-year-old teacher? She's going to be absolutely terrifying. I know there's a lot of staff members that I've seen online that have posted how scared they are to even return this fall. How are we going to address those people? How are we considering what they're thinking? Even the lunchroom people, they're going to deal with how many students each day that are going to be less than 6 feet away from them? Can you please comment on this at all and just give us your thoughts at this point? Thank
Yeah,
you.
one of my biggest frustrations when when I see those comments in social media, COVID, everything, all the studies show that COVID does not impact children the way it does older citizens, but our teachers are not children. That is always the first thought in my head, is our teachers are not children. So we have to consider them as well. And what about little Johnny, who goes home to grandma, who is in a vulnerable population? The multi-layered complications associated with this. I mean, you touched on just a few of them. But again, I know that staff is considering this, and I know that TALC is involved in these conversations. So the feedback that you just gave about teachers, staff administration is very well aware of those concerns and is addressing those concerns to the greatest extent possible. And we're gonna have to come up with creative solutions. Greg and his cabinet, and frankly, almost every employee that I have had any interaction with, from day one, the attitude has been, failure is not an option. It just is not an option. And the same is true for the fall. Failure is not an option here. We have got to provide our children with educational opportunities. And there is a strong outcry for some kind of physical presence in the schools. We've got to figure it out. We've got to find a way to make this work. And I think we've got enough talent, we've got enough brains at this school district to make it work in a way that's safe. We as board members, our job is to tell superintendent what to do. We want schools opened safely, assuming that's permissible from the state, and then he figures out how to do it. And when I look at the staff that he's got figuring out how to do it, I've got a lot of confidence, and I've got a lot of confidence knowing that I'm sending my own 4 children into those schools. Does that make sense?
We heard back from the unions about the benefits that we were supposed to be pulling them on. I've asked several teachers if they received any surveys or anything, which is what was discussed here, discussed with the board. And every person I've spoke to, not a single person heard back. In fact, they said they would be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, the last conversation I had with them was just, I want to say last week or the week before, and we did talk about that. We talked about them getting survey information to me. So let me follow up with them on that.
I just find it very important, especially with COVID-19. There are many staff, including my family, that it cost my kids having the insurance over when we have, like for me, my wife is in the system. So I think that may be beneficial, and it may be a great bargaining piece even for the district. And I think it will save us money because we're not going to be out there constantly having to recruit. People are going to be happy to want to work for, or happier to want to work for the district.
Okay, good.
And Paul, you're next.
Chris, has anybody spoken with Trey? I know in the past he's appeared before our committee and pushing the virtual education. I have a feeling that virtual education may end up being even more to the forefront than it's been in the past. And secondly, just to give everybody a heads up, I know that I always talk about my background in finance. I'm also a licensed realtor. We're seeing record numbers of transactions right now, people coming into the state of Florida, getting out of New York, getting out of New Jersey, The Northeast is saying if I have to deal with another 2 years, I'm going to do it in Southwest Florida, bring my families with me. And I think that's going to become a big problem come the next school year when we open our doors, much like after Irma, where we had a lot of influx of students. We may have a significant influx of new students next year that we're not even counting on, because we wouldn't be, because we don't know if we're starting in August, September, 2021. We don't know when we're going to be opening our doors for students.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you say that. And remember, I'm one of 7. I'm one of 7 board members. What I'm going to say to you right now is my perspective in a very brief conversation that I had with the superintendent. I told you that before this, the budget was that deep, dark hole. In my mind, I would go there and I couldn't climb out of that deep, dark hole. Well, the bright spot for me in all of this is the briefing that we're going to receive from staff in 4 months or 6 months, showing us the data that is coming out of this distance learning time that we're in right now. What worked, what didn't work, how can we make it better, and how can we expand our distance learning opportunities for students. So I wish Mr. Boyd was here, because I know that he's really focused on why do we need brick and mortar. And I said to the superintendent, we've got to look at why do we ever need to build another school, or at least another high school? Why do we ever need to build another high school? If this distance learning shows to be effective for a significant portion of our population at the high school level, why couldn't we do a permanent blended learning type environment where kids are on campus 1 week and then they're engaged in distance learning the next week, right? So I think, Paul, I think that this is a tremendous, and that's just one example. Again, that I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us to truly revolutionize the way we deliver instruction in public schools. And I'm hearing a real openness to that across the state. I know that when this is over, the Florida School Boards Association is going to put together a task force to brainstorm. What can we do? How can we do things differently? How can we allow this COVID crisis to make us better? How can we learn these lessons and really change what we're doing to the benefit of students in the community?
Mary?
I mean, I think one thing we learned with COVID-19 is that a lot of companies, whoops, I'm still, am I muted? No, a lot of companies are teleworking, and you probably heard the stories about some companies are finding they may stick with that because it saves a lot of money in real estate. So by doing school that way, we're just preparing our youth for maybe the future workforce where there's going to be a lot more telework.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
Whoa, that was tough. You guys hit me with a lot. I'm happy to sit back and relax now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, continuing with our agenda, I did want to announce tomorrow morning, Kelly and I believe, are in with for the chair's meeting with the superintendent. So we're going to be, I'm assuming, discussing this. Since we really hadn't had a meeting, I could bring to their attention whatever we come up with today, but that's about where we're at this point. But I did want to let everybody know that whatever ideas we have, this is a real good opportunity to bring them forward as soon as tomorrow morning at 7:30 in the morning. With that, what was next on the agenda? Planning session for the June meeting. Kelly, oh, do we have to advertise? I know we were just, I spoke to you earlier about a June meeting and even during the summer meeting. Have we heard back yet?
No, I have not heard back yet. And so the dilemma is that I checked with the board attorney on the summer meetings, and currently she's recommending that we don't do summer meetings beyond this. She said the board only approved the meetings in May. So I'm going to have another conversation with her that we normally do go on through the summer and make sure that it's okay. We do have to advertise it, so we will find out for sure. But in preparation for that, I just kind of was wondering if what is the feeling, because it's probably going to be a virtual one again with the group. Do we want to continue virtual through the June at least and then find out beyond that? And if so, yes, we do have to advertise and go through the process.
Sean, you have something to say?
Yes, I would encourage us, especially in this time, that the Finance Advisory Committee is going to be imperative in giving board feedback on how we should proceed and some potential things that may cost or reduce some costs in the district. So I would encourage us to please meet over the summer as we have in the past, even if it is virtually.
Paul?
And it's appropriate by the board.
Paul, you're up next.
Yes, I couldn't agree with Sean more. And Kelly, if you're able to advise the attorney that the reason that we didn't come up with a schedule for the summer months was because we couldn't meet as a committee because of COVID. Otherwise, we would have had that approved by the board at an earlier date.
Yes, thank you. I did point that out, that we normally do meet through the summer months, and that we had it on our calendar in March to have those discussions about the summer, and then our March meeting got canceled. So I'll continue those discussions with her and let you all know as soon as I hear back. I don't think that our board is going to have a problem with us to continue to meet. She's new, so she probably just isn't aware what we usually do.
John?
I was just going to echo what was already said. Obviously, the most important thing in this is what are the topics. There needs to be something substantive to them, but I think it is important to meet during the course of the summer to the extent we're all available.
I agree. Do you want to take a consensus vote, Kelly?
Yes, so that being said, it looks like, Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, it was June, hold on a minute, let me get it up here. June 17th is the date that we were proposing, which again aligns with our normal meetings, if we can continue that. And then I would also need to know, are we going to continue with discussions on COVID-19 and let us just update you on what we've received? Is that what, if we do continue, is that what you all would be expecting from the meeting?
What about anyone that's interested in continuing discussion on COVID-19 and the effects on the budget? Raise their hand. Everybody else, don't raise your hand for the summer if you're able to participate during the summer. So. We have more hands raised than not. We have Paul, Mary, John, Elena, and Sean, and myself. Anybody else? If you're unable to make it during the summer months, I believe it's June and July, they're not required. Did anybody want to, I'm lowering everybody's hand at the moment. If anybody else wants to talk, please raise your regular hand even. If you have something to say, if you're having trouble with raising your hand on here. Okay, let's go on to.
I think Sean has his hand up.
Oh, Sean, you did. It just went up, and so did Sean.
All right. The other things that I would like to monitor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One of the other things I'd like to monitor is hiring for the next school year, and just the negotiations between SPALC and those lines, as well as what we discussed at our last meeting regarding the insurance and how that is being moved forward as well. And I would also like to get a little bit of an update. We had talked before regarding exit interviews and some of the things that were said as instructors were leaving the workforce, and maybe get an update on what's going on with that. So staffing would be another issue.
A lot of sense. John?
Similar to what Sean just said, I know we had left some open items that we wanted to cover in the prior meetings, not COVID. Obviously, we didn't know about it, but I believe the bond issue was one. We had talked about transportation, I believe. There were several others. It might be worth putting all of them on the table and figure, what may be appropriate. I think talking about COVID is important, but we need to be careful in skinning that down a little bit. What other issues are important to us as a group, as a Lee County school district, and make sure we have the opportunity to discuss those too.
Yes, and our March meeting was actually, we were having our finance advisors come in March to talk to us, and of course that didn't happen. So I can definitely, if that's what you all want to discuss, I can see if we can have them do a virtual meeting with us as well.
Hey, Kelly, I think the question may be what's on the table that we were thinking about, and then maybe we can have through you, here's the priority or whatever, to get those issues on the table in addition to COVID, maybe for a discussion.
Barb, do you have the list of the items that were still outstanding that they had previously discussed? That was the finance advisor, and I'm trying to think what else was on that list. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my stuff with me.
Thank you. I couldn't find the unmute part. I do not have it with me, but let me look back and see if it was on.
Working from remote, we didn't bring all of our stuff with us.
No, I don't. But I can put it by email. I mean, I can put it in a list to get to everyone.
That would be great.
Yes, I don't have it with me. Yeah, I'm not at my office.
Okay, can you get
Thanks,
that to
Barb.
us? Are you a fan?
Sure.
Thank you. Paul, you're next.
Normal, we probably need to revisit what we were talking about as far as transportation, insurance, etc., because we don't know what transportation is going to be like for 2021 school year. Excuse me, insurance, teacher retention, staff retention, on and on and on. So my thought is at the June meeting, at the very least, let's get our update as to what's occurring, and then we can make a determination of the impact on prior discussions we've had and see if we want to change our thought process about moving forward.
Makes a lot of sense. I also wanted to add, and this is probably more directed towards Chris. I think right this second, our ability to communicate and work with the unions is probably more important than ever. I know everyone, when there's a tragedy or something happens, says, oh, it's the most important time. But right now, in order to move forward with the financial challenges, the challenges of classroom size, bus transportation, cafeteria, scared staff members, we really need to reach out to them, and they really need to reach out to their memberships to poll them and find out what people really want. And just because one side prevails over the other side doesn't mean that we should neglect the losing side on that either, however that goes. I don't know if you're able to portray that. You said Debbie's going to be our new liaison. I don't know if you're able to get information back through Debbie when you're up on the dais or during a meeting, or how that could work, or give it to Barb Kelly to get to us. But I think that may be really important. I mean, that could be one of the biggest things this board can be dealing with coming up next.
I agree with you entirely. And I'm getting a call right now from the new board attorney regarding summer meetings. So I'm going to go off video for a second, take this call, and report back to you in just a minute, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly, I think you're up next.
Okay.
With trying to discuss this and budget decisions. This is actually something that I think most of us are interested in for next month.
Okay. So I just wanted to go over, as I sent the material out to you. So we gave the board a presentation earlier about kind of like where we were and what we were thinking, what we were looking at and things like that. We're also, I want to let you know, going to have a meeting, a workshop with them on June 1st. If you're interested, we'll be doing a workshop with them on it, updating them what's going on. I sent you your packet. I'm going to put it up on the screen once I figure out how to share again and kind of walk through it. Can everyone see it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the first one's just kind of like what we're going to talk about, but let me get down to the pages here. So the second page is really when Ms. Patrica was talking about the budget that we got for next year. This is the budget that was given to us for next year, which really was not too awfully bad. When we first got it, we were feeling pretty good. So basically what you're looking at is the difference between the third calculation or the last funding that we've gotten from the state to date and what they were proposing for next year. So I want to be very clear that while the legislative session, this is what came out of that, it has not been given to the governor to sign yet. The governor has not signed this. It's not been sent to his desk. If I'm not mistaken, he has like 72 hours to sign it once it hits his desk or veto it. They've not sent it to him because this COVID-19 everything hit. So as of right now, this has not gone to the governor for signature. Some things I wanted to point out is we're looking at, before all this happened, we were looking at a growth of about 1,750 students for next year. The base student allocation, which in case you don't know, the funding that we get, the funding that we have liberty to do what we want, hire the teachers that we want, comes through the base funding, which basically takes the number of weighted students, that's the number of students that you have in their different weight factors, times the BSA that you get, times your district cost differential. So there were a lot of things going on during the session, but they did increase the base student allocation by $40, which was a wonderful increase, one that we haven't seen in a while. So that increased our overall funding about 17 million in the base, which was a really good increase in that area. Some other changes that I wanted to point out was, and I'm sure you all know about the salary enhancement supplement that was out there about giving the teachers more money. So basically what they did was they built that into the budget for next year for all districts. That was about a $16.8 million for the school district. It would have allowed us to take all of our teachers to that base amount. I think it was 47.5. I don't think that's been so long now. I'm trying to think of the number. I think it was 47.5 was the base they were looking at. In order to do that, they made some little bit of changes. They had, we had the best and brightest teacher and principal bonus that they had. They removed that, put that money into the salary enhancement supplement. But overall, we were looking at about a $34 million increase for Lee County, which is pretty good for us. That was an increase to our per student FTE of about, it would be about $8,005 per student. It was a 2.74 increase into next year. So that being said, you can see that half of that was allotted for the teacher salary increase. So, you know, but we were still feeling pretty good about it. It wasn't too awfully bad. And then COVID-19 hit. So that kind of changed everything. So we, without really knowing, we've had no idea. As you all know, it hit in March. So to know what's happening at this point, nobody really can figure it out. So what we looked at was the superintendent had talked to a representative who said that you're probably looking at going back to 10 years funding level. So we said, okay, let's look back and see what the 2008 funding level was at that time. So what this is representing is at that time, we were getting $7,479 per student. So we said, okay, if they went back to that level and the Lee County got $7,479 per student, with the number of students that we have, what would that look like? That would have been that is a $50 million decrease to Lee County if that's the funding level they go back to. That's very scary to cut $50 million in 1 year and trying to figure out how to make that happen. So we ran some other scenarios and we said, okay, so what if we went back to 2010? And as you can see, 2010 was even lower. It was at 7,155. This was during the recession. So we went back and we said, okay, let's look at during that time of the recession. Let's see what happened. At the recession, it was $7,155 a student. If we were to go to that level, it would be an $82 million loss. So we said, okay, let's look at 2012. That was, and I want to point out in 2010, we did have stimulus money that they helped put into the school districts to help them through that. In 2012, the stimulus money stopped. As you can see, the per student cost money we received went down to $6,509 per student, which if it went to that level would be $143 million loss to Lee County. We are sure hoping we don't hit any of those scenarios. But we put them out there because we really don't know what we're looking at. So then we started looking at, okay, what if we went back to last year's or the current year's or the year before? What would that look like with our student population where it is now? So we went back to 2019, and at that level, we were getting $7,544 per student. That is about a $44.3 million loss to Lee County. So we said, okay, what if we got the current year per student allocation? What would that look like? And that would be about a $20 million loss to Lee County. So as we're moving forward with this budget process, what we're doing is we're looking at different scenarios. What would we do if we had a $20 million loss? What if we had a $50 million loss? And what if we had a loss somewhere in between? So we do think, and we're going to, on June 1st, make some recommendations to the board of some things that they could lobby the legislators to do to probably help offset some of that funding. While, and it's probably not a good thing to hear, but while we think that the raising the teacher salary pay is a wonderful thing, we're not sure it's worth people losing their jobs over. So if we went back to the current year of funding and they just took that teacher salary out, we would only have to find another $4 million. It wouldn't be, a big hit. People wouldn't really be losing their jobs. We could make that happen. So we're going to be proposing different scenarios of what maybe we could propose to the legislatures when they go back in session and give them some options on maybe what they can do to help us and help other school districts. The next 2 pages are really about what allocations we were providing to the schools for next year. It was just an update to the board on that, but I'm going to skip over that piece unless anybody's interested in hearing that. Oh, wait, I see Mike has a question. Go ahead. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah. Looking at what you were showing, and you mentioned about if we just 86 the teachers' raises, that would make up 16 million of that 20 million. But I still didn't understand what you were talking about, the best and brightest, because that was a 9 million. So that would also imply taking that away also then?
So the state already took that away this year in order to move that money into the teacher salary allocation. So that's already gone. So the best and brightest is not going to happen next year. And so what we were saying, okay, so, if we did the teacher salary, the best and brightest is already gone, then that would take that 16 million for Lee County and help us out in that way.
Okay. So, but in all fairness then, in my eyes, I would think of it as we're really losing 8 million incremental for teacher salary because we already lost 9 million independent of the teacher salary regardless, right? Because it's 16 total.
So the best and brightest, and that started out as something that was outside of the FEFP previously. So what the state did in the past was that was outside of that. So that was like a grant that we got on top of that based on the teachers that qualified and the principals that qualified, and they got that bonus. Last year or the current year, the state put that funding into the FEFP. And when they did that, they kind of took away some of our other flexibility with those dollars by putting them in there. So yes, they're losing that best and brightest, but that was a limited number of teachers that and principals and staff that fit into that allocation. The teacher's salary really was bringing all teachers up to that level, and then we were working on a plan on what to do for the teachers that didn't. They were already above that base and what we could do. So it would be the bonus that the teachers had received this year would be gone. However, it was a bonus. It was never guaranteed to continue on. That's what bonuses are. The teacher salary enhancement would really be for more teachers, and it would have been a salary increase for them. Does that answer your question? I'm assuming so.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, unless anybody's interested on the school things, I'm going to skip over that right now. When COVID-19 came up, we started looking at places that, you know, where is it? Oh, wait a minute, Paul has a question. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, Kelly. Since we're talking about potentially not raising teacher salaries, I'm sure some of our contracts probably have something built in for escalation and increases in payments for the coming year. Are we going back through any of the contracts we have for the coming year and saying, we're feeling the pinch. If you want to continue servicing Lee County, let's revisit and go back to our 2019-2020 pay allocation to you as opposed to the increase that you were anticipating for 2021. I think they'll be happy to have new contracts as opposed to getting greedy and trying to grab even more money.
So I want to make sure, I was kind of hard to hear you. I just want to make sure what you're saying is, are you asking if we would stay with the current salary schedule that we have, or are you saying they would be happy with the current one, or?
No, I'm not talking about teachers. I'm talking about our contractors that we have, food service, special needs. We have contracts with third parties. Any other groups where we are employing outside of the district, so we're employing third parties, we should probably be revisiting those contracts because I'm sure a lot of them have built-in inflation, cost of living adjustments, whatever it may be. We're taking it away from our people potentially for the coming year. That's 16 million. Maybe we can find that 4 million by just doing some renegotiation on the next year's terms.
Yeah, so just so you know, our outside third-party contractors, so the people that do the, like say, speech and language with our students and stuff like that, we have aggressively been looking at those contracts over the last 2 years, making adjustments to them to bring them in line with where we believe they should be in order to help save some money for the districts. We cut some of their schedules back. They were getting paid for some days they weren't with students, and we cut that back so that they're only paid when they work with students. We gave them a day to come in and prepare for the students that they have. So we already have looked at that to some extreme, but we're looking at every single thing at this point, and outside vendor contracts will be one of those things we look at. I do believe Ms. Patrica has come back in with some stuff. Let me get her.
Mr. Chairman, may I? Okay. So in terms of contracts, the one that I can talk to you about is sports officials contracts, because I do sit on the Florida High School Athletic Association Board of Directors. They just put together a task force of sorts to determine what the maximum pay should be, because that's what the FHSAA does. They set the maximum fee for officials in the state of Florida. It will be up to us, each individual district, to negotiate up to that point. Now, I'm almost certain that we have already, before COVID started, I'm almost certain, don't quote me on this, I'm almost certain we had already entered into contracts with our officials. Should it become necessary for us to renegotiate those, I can't imagine why we wouldn't. This is going to be a time, I think what Paul was getting at, this is going to be a time of shared sacrifice. So
Yes.
that's just the one contract that I can speak to from just from my knowledge of the FHSAA.
Sean, what's up next?
And if we were not to give raises to the teachers with that 16 million, would we need to have a legislature approval on that? Or obviously it has to go through union negotiations, correct?
So if they leave that 16 million in for the raises, we would need to make sure that we're working towards making that happen. And it is negotiable. There are some negotiating items and some ability to negotiate in there. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I can just say, knowing so many teachers, that they've worked for so little for so long, that the light at the end of the tunnel, that they were finally going to get some funding and get a living wage that they could support their families without working a side hustle was welcome news. And to grab that back from them, I understand shared sacrifice, but that might be asking a lot of our workers.
Have we looked at other places to make cuts or request help from the public to try to make up some of the difference, like athletics or arts?
So the district is looking at everything right now, and I'm not saying that is where we would go. I'm saying that is a possibility in some of the discussions that we've heard that the legislators are talking about. That is not a place that we have gone. If that is in there, if that money stays in there, we would use it for its intended purpose. But we are looking at everything to see where we might be able to find the money. Right now, I know every chief has gone back into his division, and they were all into their divisions, and they were given a directive to find some money and you know, how would they make these cuts if we got this amount or this amount? What would they be proposing from their divisions? So we are looking everywhere, and everybody is trying to think outside the box to see what we can do. And that has the least impact on employees, because we really don't want to make it worse for our employees by, you know, cutting people when there might be something else that we could have done that would not have cut a person. So we're looking at everything right now. So some of the things when we were looking at it, trying to say, okay, where could we possibly see savings from this year that we could use towards next year? We have a list of them. Diesel for buses. So the only buses that are on the road right now are the ones that we have out doing some of our grab and go lunches and stuff for the students. The majority of our buses are sitting and there's no fuel being used. They're all full waiting, and we filled our tanks with the, you know, everything, and we're waiting at this point for that. So we said, okay, we'll see a savings there. So we have substitutes, of course, that we were using in the classrooms, and with the new distance learning, there was no need for substitutes. So we think we'll have some savings there, as well as, you know, substitutes for some of our bus operators when they were out and custodians when they were out. With remote working and the things that are happening, we expect our overtime costs to be reduced. So that was an area we've been looking at as well. We suspect that some of our staff may have had some supplemental contracts to do some extra work. And so we're looking at maybe, you know, does that work have to be done? Can we not do that right now? Save some money there. So there were some areas that we've been looking at, and you see where we think we can get some savings from. In the same time, there's some additional cost that goes along with this COVID-19. So normally our substitutes during the summer aren't eligible for unemployment benefits because there's no accepted guarantee that they would have had a job during the summer. There's not even an opinion that they would have, so they would not have been eligible for unemployment. However, based on what's happening, we believe that the state would say, be a little bit more lenient when it comes to our substitutes and allow them to get paid some unemployment benefits during this time. And being a government agency, whenever those benefits are supplied for anyone who works for us, we pay for them directly. So we believe we'll have some more unemployment costs that will go up. Our high school graduations, we're trying to work out some things to, for our seniors. So there'll be some more costs associated with that. We had to buy more Chromebooks in order to make sure that all of our elementary students had Chromebooks available to them, as well as hotspots, so that any student who did not have internet access at home could still do the work that was planned they needed to have done. Our grab and go lunches and things like that. There was just some more costs that came along with this as well. And then when we looked at, okay, so where are the areas that we're going to lose funding? Okay, first, the FEFP is the biggest area that we on the general fund that we suspect that there'll be some reductions. But we also, for every one of our students who takes an advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge and industry certification, and they pass the test or get a certification, we report that and we receive some additional funding on top of that that the schools can use. Well, with not testing as of right now, we're not sure how much of that testing is going to be able to be done. The state was still working on some kind of mechanism to try and test in these areas, but we think that with some of that loss, that funding will be lost. The students just won't be able to have that testing done. Sales tax, we know we're going to see a loss in sales tax. It's just we don't know where. The sales tax collections run about 2 months behind. So we'll know what happened in March and the end of May. However, that being said, March things were still open, things were still happening. There wasn't a total shutdown. The total shutdown came in April. So that's when we expect our collections to be at their lowest, is in April, and we won't know that until the end of June. On that side, of course, we just went out for the additional sales tax for the capital. So we have been meeting, the capital committee has been meeting every day, and we have been going through our capital plan, trying to figure out, where should these adjustments be made. Our technical colleges and adult ed, they're going to have a loss of funding because they have not been able to offer the programs. A lot of those are hands-on. You can't have somebody working a diesel engine virtually. So there's some areas that they're going to lose some funding. The interest rates dropped, so of course our interest income has dropped. Our fee-based programs at our schools, they're not able to run their fee-based programs. They're not able to run their summer programs. They're going to have a loss in those as well. And then the rentals of our buildings and places like that. So we're trying to look at everything and trying to figure out where we can get money, where we can expect that we won't have as much money, and trying to find that perfect middle ground. I see there's a question from Sean. So go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you very much for going through that with us. I think that possibly we could expand some adult education to get some additional fees from that working virtually, especially in professional services, paralegals, those types of programs may be good expansions of the adult education programs, not getting into curriculum in this meeting. But as far as hotspots, have we looked at working with Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T to have them sponsor those hotspots and the Wi-Fi connections for the students, or even taking a mobile unit, mobile tower into a specific area of high concentration to allow them to pull off of that temporary tower like they do in hurricanes. And that might be good to bid out, and they may even sponsor that for advertising. Hotspots provided by AT&T, it might look good for them and their shareholders. So there may be some ways around some of these cost increases, and in high school graduation, we might be able to do a little bit of savings by making things a little bit better for them. Instead of having to rent out Hertz Arena or whatever it's going to be called once they go into bankruptcy, high school graduation might be able to be done digitally, and a little bit more special where they get a video of their own delivered digitally, and using technology just to its highest capabilities. We might be able to ensure some cost savings. My 2 cents.
Okay, thanks. So on the hotspots, I do know that some of the wireless carriers are working on providing internet access for families, but that was causing, from my understanding, now don't quote me completely because this was just discussions I had, there was still, if a family did not have it already, there was a connection fee and things that they were having to pay, and so it was kind of hard. And then in the time that we needed, they were 2 to 3 weeks out in getting things set up, and we needed our students to have access as soon as possible. I will talk to them about maybe getting somebody to sponsor them and see if maybe that's something that we could have done. Graduations, I believe that as of right now, we're planning virtual graduations to start with, and I think the schedule was approved. And then I think we're going to try and do another graduation. I see Miss Patrica's hand up, so if you don't mind, I'm going to jump over to her and let her speak to these things.
Paul, you're next.
Yeah, so in terms of the digital divide, there's a significant state level initiative to bridge the digital divide, making sure that areas of the state that don't have easy access to the internet. So I think we're going to see some help from the state there. And in terms of sponsorships, every single school district in the entire country required these hotspots, and getting them to sponsor at a time like this was really, really difficult. I will say that you know, what we have in Trey Davis is the guy that, you know, he calls Comcast, and the CEO of Comcast calls him back. You know, that's who Trey is. That's how he negotiates. He's able to negotiate at the highest levels of organizations. And Kelly said it best. We needed the hotspots. We needed them fast. The other issue I understand with, you mentioned a hotspot tower or putting a hotspot on a bus. It was not possible for us to do this and do that and have students be socially distanced. And I believe that's why we were not able to do that. Now, in terms of graduations, we are doing both. The virtual graduation schedule was approved. Today's Wednesday, right? Yesterday. And we have also approved dates for a Hertz and FSW person face-to-face graduations sometime at the end of July. I don't know the dates off the top of my head. But we are intending to go forward with those, assuming CDC guidelines permit. And, you know, Sean, I got to tell you, that is not the most efficient way to handle high school graduations. But we can't always have efficiency be the #1 determining factor in the decisions that we make. We had students and parents and community members just desperate for their children to be able to have their accomplishments acknowledged in a formal, traditional way. So we decided to go ahead with the virtual graduations in the short term so that every kid can experience a graduation. Every kid, including those that are shipping off to the military as soon as their studies are completed, those who are leaving the state as soon as their studies are completed, those kids get to have that acknowledgement of their accomplishments. And then later in July, for the students who are still in the area, hopefully, CDC guidelines permitting, we'll be able to have that more traditional walk across the stage. I hear you, Sean. It was not the most efficient way to go, but it was a judgment call made by the governance team to provide students with that opportunity.
Paul, would be next.
Couple of things. I think I'm trying to find the cup half full. Kelly, when you're talking about interest rates, yes, I know on our investment side, they're low. We should probably revisit our debt side because we probably could renegotiate or structure our loans. Everybody else is. I don't see why we can't. We've talked in the past about buying futures contracts, maybe with oil prices also being at record lows, we could revisit that again. And lastly, before the private sector jumps in, and they are going to, we probably need to position our teachers, because there are going to be plenty of parents who are going to say, I want my child to be up to full speed for the next school year. They're already behind for tutoring services, etc. And where we might be able to assist our teaching staff, especially if we're going to be taking away from them on one side potentially with that $16 million, bringing them their salaries up to a living wage, as Sean said. Maybe we could help them and say, we're going to be pulling back some of that, potentially all of it, and that's just one scenario. But here's another opportunity for you. Before the private sector steps in, be in contact with the parents of your students and handle it outside. Obviously, it's got to be handled with talc and everything else for them to be able to do it. But otherwise, the private sector is going to scoop this up very quickly.
Thank you. On the debt, I'm not sure, and we can talk to our financial advisors, but I believe that our debt is in the COPS area, and I don't believe that we have the availability at this point to do anything with the COPS. There's only certain times that you can look at making changes in that, and we can't refund them anymore. That was an availability that was taken away from us in statute. So, but I will check with him and see if we have any way that we could possibly reduce our debt there. We do have very good rates as it stands, so it might not even be possible to reduce them beyond where they are. I had the same problem with my own mortgage. I couldn't, it was already low. They wouldn't go any lower. So, but thank you. Anything else before I go on? Okay, so the next pages are basically, there's a lot of stuff in here from the economic survey that was done in April. They have released another one, and I have not had the opportunity to look at it. It was just emailed to me. But that, if you're interested, you can read through that. But I want to get down to here. So with the sales tax, we went through and tried to do some estimates of what we believed our sales tax would look like. So based on past history, you know, we looked at back in when the Depression hit and things like that and what happened. Now, even when the Depression hit, it wasn't a complete shutdown, which is what we have now. We did some projections. We looked at the current year projections to see where we would be. We had originally projected that we would collect about $83 million this year. Based on the projections that we have, we're looking at now, we think that'll be about $8.7 million less than it is right now. We think it might come out about $75 million instead. Again, we will not know for sure until June because of the way the collections come in. But we looked at next year and we said, okay, based on 21, we kind of looked at different scenarios and what would it look like. We looked at a scenario where the economy just came back really slow, like it did in the Depression. You know, we had the Depression. It came back slower. What would that look like? What if it came back a little bit quicker? You know, we kind of went through those scenarios. So if you see on the top of this page, our projections, the first projection is if the economy just comes back at a really slow pace. It takes everything a while to get caught back up. Our second projection was kind of a midpoint. You know, it might start out slow, but then it's going to pick up as people start feeling more comfortable. And then our third projection is just basically what if it just kicks right back in and we're up and running again. Then we were looking at that projection. So we're still trying to feel our way through. We're waiting for the May ones to come in so we could at least see what that little bit of March did to us to maybe see, you know, ahead what we're going to do. We have based our, we're looking at our capital plan based on worst case scenario because we figured it's easier to add back than it is to make cuts. So we didn't want to put an expectation out that we couldn't handle. So we went with about the worst case scenario when we did our projections in our capital plan, and we're working towards that, making those cuts. And then we have a list on the side of things that, you know, if it's not that bad, what would we be adding back in? And that's what the capital committee is working on right now. that's what I have. We still don't know. We've not heard from the legislatures or anything since we did this briefing in the May 5th. I will tell you, yesterday we did brief the board again on some food service stuff. Our food service has a nice hefty fund balance. They always have. We do believe we will go into that fund balance a little bit with having the feeding that we're doing, our reimbursement. We get our money from food service based on federal reimbursement. So when you feed a student, you get reimbursed for that. During the regular school year, when you're feeding them in, just a regular breakfast and lunch during the session, during the school day, you get a higher reimbursement rate than you do in the summer. Our COVID-19, where you get the reimbursement rate based on the summer feeding. So it's a lower reimbursement rate. So we do expect that we will have to hit that fund balance a little bit. Their fund balance has usually ran about 20 million. We're assuming it to get down to 11 million. Their fund balance is so good that every year they have to write a spend down plan that they have to submit to the state. We have relooked at their spend down plan. We've made some adjustments to that so that they have a little bit of cushion in there. They're still going to have a nice fund balance. The fund balance at the food service has to be 3 months worth of expenditures, and we have more than that. We think will be left in their fund balance as well. Somebody had mentioned food service earlier, so I wanted to touch on that as well. Any questions? Okay, then I'll open it up for discussion.
When are we expected to get more information on the numbers? Last I heard, it was supposed to be the last week of May.
So what we've been told is the economist can't even tell the state what's going to happen until the end of May, beginning of June. So I really don't know that we'll hear anything before that.
So having a meeting in June could be very beneficial. We should have the numbers by the middle to end of June.
I'm sure hoping we'll have it shortly after we start June. I have to have a preliminary budget to the board at the preliminary budget to the board at the end of June. So I'm hoping I have something to work off of.
Any other questions or comments? Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you. Kelly mentioned we do have a brand new board attorney. She's what, 3 weeks old, Kelly?
Yeah.
And she is very dot the I, cross the T. And I appreciate that because I'm a rule follower. So her opinion is that since we brought it in front of the board for the board to approve May meetings, just to dot every I and cross every T, we're going to bring it in front of the board for the next meeting to approve summer meetings for all committees. And then in the long term, or the short to medium term, so that we don't run into this issue next year, we're going to take a look at the policy and hopefully bring it in front of the board to change the policy. Because right now the policy says that you shall meet at least once during specific months. So we've got to change that up a little bit to give you guys some flexibility. But one of the 4 main issues in our strategic plan is to increase community engagement, and that's what you guys are. Your community, you're engaged. You want to be engaged over the summer. So I know I'm only one of 7, but I can't imagine that not being approved by the board. So I really think it's kind of a technicality. Am I making sense?
Thank you, Chris. That makes a lot of sense. Mr. Evans, I'm assuming you're not Stephanie?
Last time I checked, that was not me. So I don't know who this one would be directed to, but so I've had some conversations with 6 people I've got business relationships with up out of New Jersey and New York. And I know that all 6 of them have already expressed that they are moving their companies here in Southwest Florida. So out of that, they're looking at about 320 family units that are moving in. My concern is the budget that we were just going over only accounted for 1,750 new students. So we're talking about there's a cut in budget, but yet that number could potentially be 3,000 to 3,500 new students. What are we looking at in the way of facilities and also budgeting when we're saying, hey, that number realistic? I mean, if we're talking about just 6 of my friends that are basically saying, I'm going to bring about 320 new family units into your area because I want to be there and I want out of New York and I want out of New Jersey. How are we looking and starting the process to handle the aspect that 750 potentially realistically within the next 3 to 4 months could be a false narrative?
So we, during the summer months especially, we watch the enrollment as it goes up. I'm in contact weekly with the planning department because of course we project our students based on the numbers that, you know, we have with the state with what our history's been. So we project it that way, but we watch it throughout the summer to see, are we on target? Are we, you know, seeing more? Are we seeing less? We also, on day 10 of school, between 10 and 12, it depends where it falls, we relook at the students again. We have the schools schedule all of the students. We go back in and we look to see, do they have more students than we thought they were going to have? Do they have less students than we thought they were going to have? And we readjust at that point. We go school by school and look at every scenario and we readjust at that point. And then in October is the first time that we actually report. So up to this point, if we get the kids, we're educating them based on the money we've already, you know, they proposed of the 1,700 increase. But in October, if they're here by October, we're educating them in October. We report them during the FTE survey, and the state then realigns the funding based on where the students are. So if we have seen a large influx of students in October, then our next payment cycle will reflect that. Now, if they're coming from another part of Florida, it's much easier because it's just a movement of dollars. So the state has an allocation, I mean, an enrollment projection they have statewide. If the state goes over that total projection, every county gets a proration. So that's where the struggle comes at this point is, if the influx to all of the counties is greater than what the state had expected in their projections, they don't have the money to fund it. So they do a proration and everybody takes their proportionate share of the cut. So you get more because the students are here, but then your cut's greater because you're getting more because the students are here. So it's kind of a catch-22. But we do go look at that all the time and we do it. And that's something I think that to talk to the state about is, you know, did they re-looked at their enrollment projections based on the movement of people coming here from other states? And I think that's a legitimate request to ask them.
Well, I think part of that even goes into, aside from just the sheer budget side of it, I guess one of my biggest concerns would be, how are we going to house that many students? I mean, you know, we all know that there's a shortage of teachers. There's overcrowding in classrooms in this market anyway. You know, if we're talking about potentially, let's say it's even not double. Let's say it's an additional 20% over and above what the projection was. How you know, what is the board looking like? Because obviously there's a budget number that has to be attached to that. So what is the board looking at, and how are they going to house those students? How are we going to provide, you know, assistance to those students, that type of process?
Well, we'll do our best. You know, we have schools that are overutilized. We do have some schools that are not utilized to their fullest capacity. So we'll be putting them where we have some capacity. And then, you know, we'll do what we can do. If we have to move portables to accommodate them, we will do whatever we can do to accommodate the students when they come. I think Ms. Patrica has some more to add to that.
Chris is up next.
The state, you know, we need to reach out to the state and be sharing information exactly like what you just stated, Mr. Evans. You know, granted, your statement is anecdotal, but are we looking at those trends at a state level to determine if the state needs to adjust the number of students they're expecting to be in our system next year? From a capital perspective, we're already in catch-up mode. we're already playing catch up in terms of, I think I saw the other day, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, our South Zone schools are at 107% capacity, right?
Our East Zone schools are at the highest capacity. South is right behind those, and then the West has more capacity than the other two zones. I think our East Zone was, I think it was the 108 capacity right now. It was the East Zone that was really big.
So we're already playing catch up. The point of the half penny sales tax was to get us to a point where we weren't playing catch up. We could build using cash. Of course, we had to issue the COPS in the very beginning, but we will do exactly what we had been doing before the half penny sales tax was passed, which is, as Kelly said, if we have to deploy portables in the short term, we will deploy portables in the short term. And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong on this as well. If we have a portable on a campus, is that not considered a permanent seat by the state when we're looking at fish capacity?
Yes, it is.
So I don't want to do that. I don't want to put portables on campuses, but you can't get water from a stone either. If we don't have the money, we've got to have seats for children. So it's not a great answer, but we do have experience in doing this. So yeah. I'm confident that we can continue.
And then our schools are really good. Also, I want to give a kudos to our schools because they do really good with their space. And even they'll have floating teachers. So, during a planning period, there's no students in that classroom. So our schools are actually rotating teachers into those classrooms during another teacher's planning period to use that classroom space. And so we have that we do as well. And I guess for the short term, there might be some additional floating teachers that have to be done, but we'll do what we need to do to make sure that our students have a seat in the schools.
Paul's up next.
Chris, going to your point, what kind of timeline do you have that you need to get those types of statistics? I'm very active with the Florida Realtors and the local Realtor Board. They have those statistics of the movement from the chief economist, from the National Association of Realtors, so they can get those statistics together. So let me know if you want to do it here or offline, what data you need. I'll get the ball rolling on our end and see what we can get into your possession.
I mean, I would think it's the committee's pleasure to decide when, but if you get those numbers to me, I'll bring them to the board and we can have a discussion about getting them to our lobbyists, Carol Green, sorry. And then of course, in my individual engagement with our legislators, I would be engaging in those conversations as well. But I would also ask you in whatever relationships you might have, whatever organizations you might be a part of, to also advocate for a deep look at the numbers they're projecting now and the numbers we should realistically be expecting based on this. Mr. Evans, I started that trend 8 years ago. I voted with my feet moving out of New York, just so you know.
I knew I liked you for some reason.
Sean, you're up next.
Sean, hold on, you're muted. Let me get you unmuted here.
There it is.
There you go.
Okay. There was a bill in the legislature last session regarding creating a marketplace for remote sales. Colorado was the first one to do this, and they were able to increase their revenues by about $750 million per year. Now, if Florida would have passed that Marketplace Act, and the sales are absolutely taxable today as use tax, it would just create a marketplace for the technology to collect and remit the sales tax. We would have increased our revenue by, they estimated the first year to be about $850 million. So that is money that we completely left on the table to pay for education, to pay for affordable housing, to pay for all of these other things. So I don't see any special session that would happen this year, because who in the heck wants to go up to Tallahassee, stop campaigning to cut budget? And I don't think any current sitting legislator is willing to do that at this point. So if we do have a special session, it would probably be after November 3rd. And then they would have free will to make whatever, they would be enamored to actually do the cutting with a hatchet rather than a smaller knife and be precise about it. So just these things have consequences, and we've built the system we've built, and I think that we do have a chance to actually get some of these funds back, but we're going to see what some would see as a tax increase, but it's really legally collectible now.
So just so you know, we're in the June 1st briefing, one of the things we're going to do is provide to the board some items that we believe we should talk to our legislators about and have our liaison take to them. And that was absolutely one of the things that's on our list.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe we can actually wrap up on time today. Kelly, can you please get back to us about June? Actually, I'm interested in the summer months. Chris, we're going to really miss you. Hopefully you'll keep in touch with everyone in this committee. And hopefully we can continue to work through the summer, even by Zoom, so that we can try to come forward with some help for the district. The other committees right now, they're probably down because there's not much they can do. Construction probably is stopped, or at least new construction stopped. Curriculum, everything's up in the air. But we may be able to help out with trying to save a few bucks or a direction moving forward. With that, does anybody have anything to add?
Daryl, I really do love you guys. I really, really do. Like, this has been a bright spot for me each month, being able to come and work with you guys. I am really, really going to miss you. But I will tell you that when I sit and I have budget discussions at the table, I am more and more impressed every discussion we have with Ms. Jordan. So I think you're going to be in really, really good hands with her. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chris. With that, do we have a motion to, Sean?
I move to adjourn.
We have a second.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Looks like all in
Aye.
favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good summer.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll hear back in a few days from Kelly.
Yep.
And take care. And
Thank you, everyone.
see you all soon.
All the best, guys. Take care.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Take care.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.